In the misty dawn of the 17th century, when the seas were ruled by whispers of gold and the shadows of cursed souls, there lived a young sailor named Elias Blackthorne, who had grown up in the rugged ports of England, dreaming of adventure beyond the grey horizons. But little did he know that his fate would entwine with the dark rituals of ancient pirates. A secret brotherhood that traced its origins back to forgotten empires where blood oaths and forbidden ceremonies bound men to the depths of the ocean. And as Elias stood on the creaking deck of the merchant ship, Sea Serpent, watching the waves crash against the hull like angry spirits, he felt a strange chill run down his spine, for the captain had been muttering about strange lights seen at night, glowing orbs that danced on the water like lost souls calling from the abyss, and Elias, with his sharp eyes and curious mind, couldn't help but wonder if these were mere tricks of the light or something more sinister, perhaps remnants of the old pirate legends his grandfather used to tell by the fire, stories of captains who made pacts with dark forces to command the winds and tides, sacrificing their crews in moonlit rituals to appease sea gods long forgotten by civilized men. And as the ships sailed further into the Caribbean waters, where islands hid treasures and dangers alike, Elias noticed a peculiar tattoo on the arm of one of the older sailors. A symbol of a coiled serpent devouring its own tail, encircled by runes that seemed to pulse with an unearthly glow under the sun. And when he asked about it, the sailor, Old Man Hawkins, growled in a low voice, warning him to mind his own business, for some marks carried curses that could drag a man to the locker of Davy Jones himself. But Elias's curiosity only grew, like a flame fed by wind, and that night, as the crew gathered for their evening rum, he overheard whispers of a hidden cove on Isla Muerta, a place where ancient pirates performed rituals to summon storms and bury their gold under protective spells, ensuring that only those who knew the incantations could ever claim it. And Elias, lying in his hammock, couldn't sleep, his mind racing with images of blood-stained altars and ghostly figures chanting in tongues lost to time. And by morning, when a thick fog enveloped the ship, making it impossible to see beyond the bowsprit, the captain ordered all hands on deck, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. And sure enough, through the mist emerged the silhouette of a derelict vessel, its sails torn and blackened, drifting aimlessly like a phantom from the past. And as they drew closer, Elias volunteered to board it with a small party, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement, for this could be his chance to uncover the truths behind the legends. And stepping onto the ghost ship's deck, he felt the wood groan under his feet as if alive with memories. And scattered about were remnants of a crew long gone, bones picked clean by time, with strange amulets clutched in skeletal hands, each bearing the same serpent symbol. And in the captain's quarters, Elias found a weathered journal, its pages yellowed and ink faded. But as he opened it, the words seemed to leap out at him, describing rituals performed under the blood moon, where pirates drank from a chalice filled with the essence of the sea mixed with human blood, binding their souls to eternal service in exchange for immortality on the waves. And Elias's hands trembled as he read of the first ritual, led by a pirate king named Blackbeard himself, though this was before his fame, when he was just Edward Teach, a young marauder who discovered an ancient tome washed ashore from a Spanish galleon, a book said to have been penned by Aztec priests who worship sea demons. And Teach, driven by greed, gathered his loyal men on a stormy night, drawing a circle of salt and bone on the beach, chanting words that twisted the air and summoned shadows that whispered promises of untold riches, but at a price, for each participant had to offer a piece of their soul, marked by the serpent tattoo that would burn forever on their flesh, reminding them of the pact. And as Elias delved deeper into the journal, he learned of the horrors that followed, crews vanishing in the night, ships sinking without trace, and survivors raving about tentacles rising from the deep to claim the unworthy. And suddenly, a creak behind him made Elias spin around, only to find Hawkins standing there, his eyes dark with knowledge, admitting that he was once part of that brotherhood, forced into the ritual as a boy, and now hunted by the curse that demanded fresh blood every lunar cycle, or else the sea would rise to swallow him whole. And Elias, horrified yet intrigued, begged for more details, and Hawkins, with a sigh like the wind through rigging, began to recount his own initiation. On a moonless night off the coast of Tortuga, where the pirate lord assembled 13 men, each chosen for their sins, and they lit torches fueled by whale oil mixed with gunpowder, creating flames that burned blue and cold. And in the center stood an altar carved from driftwood, adorned with shells and pearls stolen from mermaid graves. Or so the legend went, and as the chant began, low and rhythmic, echoing like thunder from the depths, the men cut their palms, letting blood drip into a golden bowl inscribed with runes that glowed as the liquid touched them. And Hawkins described the sensation as fire in his veins, visions of drowned cities and monstrous beings flashing before his eyes. And when it was over, they buried a chest of gold under the sand, sealing it with the ritual's power, ensuring that any who tried to dig it up without the words would be cursed with madness, their skin peeling like old sails in the sun. And Elias, listening intently, felt a pull towards this dark world, as if the journal's words were weaving a spell around him. And just then, a shout from above deck interrupted them, the fog lifting to reveal sails on the horizon, black flags fluttering ominously, bearing the serpent emblem, and the ghost ship began to shudder, as if awakening from slumber. And Elias realized with a start that this was no coincidence. The derelict vessel was a trap, a beacon for those who sought the ancient secrets, drawing in the curious to feed the ritual's hunger. And as pirates boarded from the approaching ship, their faces scarred and eyes gleaming with fanatic zeal, Elias grabbed the journal and fled below decks, Hawkins following close behind, whispering that the only way to escape was to complete a counter-ritual, one that involved facing the sea's wrath head-on. But Elias, heart racing, wondered if he could trust the old man, or if this was all part of the deception, and hiding in the hold amid barrels of rotting provisions. He flipped through the journal's pages frantically, searching for clues, finding sketches of star alignments and moon phases that dictated when the rituals must be performed, and descriptions of artifacts needed, like a dagger forged from meteor iron, said to have fallen from the skies during a comet's pass, used to pierce the heart of a willing sacrifice to renew the pact. And Elias shuddered at the thought, imagining the screams echoing across the waves, but his thoughts were cut short by footsteps above. The pirates searching methodically, their voices murmuring incantations that made the air thick and heavy, and Hawkins urged him to be silent, revealing that he had broken from the Brotherhood years ago, stealing a map to the original ritual site, hoping to destroy the source of the curse, but he needed a pure soul, someone untainted by the mark, to help him. And Elias, seeing no other choice, agreed, pocketing the journal as they slipped through a hidden hatch into the bilge, the water sloshing around their knees like grasping hands. And as they waded towards a small boat tied to the side, Elias felt the ship lurch, as if pulled by invisible currents, and glancing back, he saw the pirate captain, a towering figure with a beard braided with bones, holding aloft a glowing amulet, chanting words that summoned wind and wave. And the sea began to boil, bubbles rising like souls escaping hell. And Elias and Hawkins rowed furiously away, the ghost ships sinking behind them in a whirlpool of foam and debris. But the pursuing pirates gave chase in their swift sloop, cannons booming like thunder, and Elias, dodging splinters from near misses, realized this was just the beginning, for the dark rituals were not mere stories, but a living force that hungered for more initiates. And as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in blood-red hues, he vowed to uncover the full truth, no matter the cost, leading him deeper into a web of mystery that spanned centuries. From the ancient Phoenician sailors who first whispered to the sea gods, to the Viking raiders who carved runes on their longships for protection against krakens, and now to these Caribbean outlaws who blended old-world magic with new-world greed, creating a hybrid of terror that could swallow empires whole. And Elias, clutching the journal like a lifeline, knew that the hook was set, pulling him inexorably towards the heart of the darkness, where secrets buried in sandy graves awaited resurrection. And as night fell, stars twinkling like watchful eyes, he wondered if he would emerge from this alive, or become another ghost in the endless tale of the ancient pirates' dark rituals. But for now, the chase continued, waves crashing, sails billowing, and the promise of revelation hanging in the salt-laden air like a noose waiting to tighten. And little did Elias know that the journal held not just history, but a prophecy of a chosen one who would either break the cycle or become its eternal guardian. And as Hawkins steered the boat towards a distant island, silhouetted against the moon, Elias felt the weight of destiny pressing upon him, the suspense building like a storm on the horizon, ready to unleash its fury in ways he could scarcely imagine. And so the adventure truly began, with mysteries unfolding one wave at a time, drawing him into the shadowy underbelly of pirate lore where rituals bound men to fates worse than death, and the sea itself seemed to whisper his name, calling him to join the eternal dance of the damned. But Elias, with grit born of his humble beginnings, resolved to fight back, turning the tables on the ancient curse that had claimed so many before him. And as they approached the island's shore, lined with jagged rocks like teeth of a beast, he spotted flickering lights in the jungle, perhaps campfires of more pirates or signs of the ritual in progress. And Hawkins warned him that once they set foot there was no turning back, for the land was sacred to the old ones, cursed with traps both natural and supernatural, where vines could come alive to strangle intruders, and ghosts of sacrificed sailors roamed the paths, seeking vengeance on the living. And Elias nodded, steeling himself, the journal's pages rustling in the wind as if eager to reveal more. And stepping onto the beach, sand soft under his boots, he felt a vibration beneath his feet, like the heartbeat of the earth itself, pulsing in rhythm with the waves, and following Hawkins into the dense foliage, pushing through leaves that dripped with dew like tears. They encountered their first obstacle, a crumbling stone archway covered in vines, inscribed with the serpent symbol, and as they passed under it, a low hum filled the air, making Elias's tattoo-less skin tingle. And Hawkins explained that this was a gateway, testing the worthiness of those who entered, and for the marked, it granted passage, but for others, it could unleash illusions that drove men mad. And sure enough, visions began to assault Elias, images of his family back home, calling for help as flames engulfed their cottage, but he shook them off, knowing they were false, drawing strength from the journal's words that spoke of mental fortitude as the key to survival. And pressing on, they reached a clearing where an ancient altar stood, moss-covered and stained with what looked like old blood, surrounded by totems carved from bone, depicting sea creatures with human faces, twisted in agony. And Hawkins knelt, pulling out a small vial from his pocket, containing a drop of his own blood from the original ritual, and he dripped it onto the altar, causing the stone to crackle and glow, revealing a hidden compartment that slid open with a grind of stone on stone, and inside was a map, yellowed and fragile, pointing to the true site of the first ritual, not on this island but on a hidden atoll far to the south, guarded by reefs that shifted with the tides. And as Elias unfolded the map, memorizing its details, a rustle in the bushes alerted them to danger, the pursuing pirates emerging from the shadows, their leader sneering with triumph, demanding the journal and the map, for they needed them to perform the grand renewal, a ritual that happened once every century to strengthen the pact, requiring a sacrifice of pure blood like Elias's. And a fierce fight ensued, swords clashing in the moonlight, Hawkins fending off two attackers with surprising agility for his age, while Elias, untrained but quick, dodged and weaved, using the journal as a makeshift shield to block a blow. And in the chaos, he recited a phrase from its pages, a counter-incantation that caused the totems to rumble, vines snaking out to entangle the pirates, giving them a chance to escape, running back to the beach where their boat waited. But one pirate broke free, lunging at Elias with a dagger, grazing his arm and drawing blood, which dripped onto the sand. And immediately, the ground trembled, as if the curse recognized fresh offering, and waves surged higher, threatening to swamp the boat as they pushed off, rowing with all their might, the pirates cursing from the shore, vowing to hunt them to the ends of the earth. And as they sailed into the night, Elias bandaged his wound, noticing that the cut formed a feigned outline of the serpent, as if the ritual had begun to claim him against his will, adding a layer of personal horror to the mystery. For now he was marked, his time limited before the curse fully took hold, urging him to find the atoll and break the cycle before it was too late. And Hawkins, panting from exertion, shared more tales from his past, of comrades who succumbed to the ritual's madness, turning on each other in fits of paranoia, believing every shadow hid a betrayer, and of treasures beyond imagining, hordes of gold from sunken armadas, protected by spells that made them invisible to all but the initiated. And Elias, gazing at the stars for navigation, felt the hook deepen, the suspense mounting with every mile, knowing that the dark rituals were not just history but a force that shaped the seas, influencing storms and fortunes alike. And as dawn broke, revealing calm waters ahead, he wondered what horrors awaited at the atoll, where the ancient pirate's legacy pulsed like a living thing, waiting for its next victim or savior. And thus the journey continued, fraught with peril and promise, drawing Elias ever closer to the heart of the enigma that was the dark rituals of ancient pirates. But for now, the sea was quiet, a deceptive peace before the storm that would test his very soul. and he clutched the map tightly, determined to unravel the threads of mystery one knot at a time, unaware that spies among the waves in the form of spectral birds sent by the pirate lord watched their progress, reporting back to ensure the ritual's completion, adding an invisible layer of threat to their flight. And as the sun climbed higher, Elias's mind raced with questions about the origins of the rituals, perhaps stemming from even older civilizations like the Egyptians who worshipped river gods or the Greeks with their tales of Poseidon, adapted by seafaring folk over millennia into this twisted form, blended with voodoo from African slaves brought to the New World, creating a potent mix of magic and mayhem that empowered pirates to dominate the oceans. And Hawkins confirmed some of this, recalling how the Brotherhood recruited from all walks, sailors from Europe, escaped slaves from plantations, even native islanders who knew the old ways, all bound by the blood oath. And the rituals involved not just sacrifice but dances around bonfires, drumming, rhythms that mimicked the heartbeat of the deep, invoking entities that granted boons like fair winds or enemy ships appearing on the horizon like gifts, but always at the cost of humanity, turning men into monsters over time, their eyes hollowing with the weight of stolen souls. And Elias, absorbing this, felt a growing resolve. Perhaps he was the one to end it, the outsider with fresh eyes to see the flaws in the ancient system. And as they spotted land in the distance, a small K2 resupply, he hoped for a moment's respite. But upon landing, they found the place deserted, huts abandoned in haste, with signs of struggle, claw marks on doors as if from massive beasts, and in the center of the village, a fresh altar, still wet with blood, indicating the pirates had been here recently, performing a minor ritual to track them. And Elias's heart sank, realizing the chase was far from over. The mystery deepening with each discovery, suspense building like coils of a spring ready to snap, and they quickly gathered what food they could, fruits and fresh water, before setting sail again, the wind picking up as if aiding their escape or hurting them towards doom. And Elias, studying the map under the light of a lantern, traced the path to the atoll, noting symbols that warned of guardians, perhaps mythical creatures or illusions born of the curse. And Hawkins taught him a few protective chants, words to ward off the worst, but caution that nothing was foolproof against the ancient power. And as night fell once more, stars brighter in the tropical sky, Elias dreamed of underwater temples where pirates' spirits gathered, performing eternal rituals to maintain their hold on the living world. And he awoke with a start to the sound of distant cannons, the pirate sloop closing in again, forcing them to alter course into treacherous waters, navigating by instinct through reefs that could tear the hull apart. And in the tension of the moment, Elias felt alive, the hook of adventure firmly set, pulling him through waves of fear and excitement, towards the core of the dark rituals that had shaped the pirate age. And little did he know that the atoll held not just the source but a revelation about his own lineage. For his grandfather's stories were more than tales, they were warnings from a former brother who escaped, passing down the knowledge through blood, making Elias the key to it all. But for now, he focused on survival, the story unfolding with each crashing wave, mystery layering upon mystery in the endless sea of intrigue. And as the pursuit intensified, with great shot whistling overhead, Elias and Hawkins fought back, using makeshift weapons from the boat, a broken oar as a club, fending off boarding attempts until a lucky swell separated them, allowing escape into a fog bank that rolled in like a cloak from the gods. And hidden within, they caught their breath, plotting the final leg to the atoll, where the grand ritual loomed, timed with the next blood moon, just days away, adding urgency to their quest. And Elias, bandaged wound throbbing, wondered if he could resist the curse's call, or if he would succumb like so many before, becoming part of the dark legacy. But his determination burned bright, fueling the suspense that kept him rowing forward into the unknown heart of the ancient pirate's secrets. And thus part 1 drew to a close. But the tale was far from over, continuing seamlessly from here in the next installment, where the fog lifted to reveal a cluster of small islands dotting the horizon like forgotten jewels scattered by a careless giant, their shores lined with white sand that gleamed under the emerging sun, and palm trees that bent gracefully in the breeze as if bowing to the sea's eternal rhythm. And Elias, squinting against the light, felt a surge of hope mixed with trepidation, for these islands could provide shelter and resources, but they might also harbor dangers unknown, perhaps remnants of the ancient pirates or other outlaws hiding from the law. And Hawkins, gripping the oars with knuckles white from strain, nodded towards the largest island, saying in his gravelly voice that it looked like a good place to lay low and repair their battered boat, maybe find fresh water and food to sustain them on the longer journey to the atoll. And as they rowed closer, the water turning from deep blue to turquoise, schools of colorful fish darting beneath the surface like living gems, Elias couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the Caribbean, a paradise that hid such dark secrets beneath its serene facade. And he thought back to his life in England, the cold rains and crowded ports, how he had yearned for adventure. But now, entangled in this web of rituals and curses, he wondered if the price was too high. Yet the fire in his heart burned brighter, driven by the need to end the cycle that had claimed so many lives, and as the boat scraped against the sandy bottom, they pulled it ashore, hiding it in a thicket of mangroves whose roots twisted like the serpent symbol itself, providing natural camouflage from prying eyes. And venturing inland, the air thick with the scent of blooming flowers and salt, they heard the calls of exotic birds echoing through the canopy, their feathers flashing bright colors as they flitted from branch to branch. And Elias, his arm throbbing from the wound, paused to tear a strip from his shirt to bind it tighter, the faint serpent outline seeming to writhe under his touch, a reminder that time was running out before the curse fully took hold, turning him into one of the Brotherhood's slaves. And Hawkins, noticing his discomfort, shared a story from his youth to distract him, telling of how he first went to sea as a cabin boy on a merchant vessel, learning the ropes literally and figuratively. But one fateful night, pirates attacked, led by a captain with the mark, who spared him only because he saw potential for the rituals, and thus Hawkins was initiated, the pain of the tattoo branding his soul as much as his skin. And he described the ceremony in vivid detail, the circle of men on a moonlit deck, the chant rising like a storm, the knife slicing palm, blood mixing with seawater in a bowl carved from whalebone, and the visions that followed, of vast underwater realms where sunken cities teemed with spectral inhabitants, guardians of lost knowledge that the rituals tapped into, drawing power from the abyss to bend nature to their will. And Elias, listening while they pushed through underbrush, vines snagging at their clothes like grasping fingers, felt a chill despite the tropical heat, imagining the weight of such power and the corruption it brought, for every boon came with a cost. A piece of humanity eroded away until only a shell remained, driven by endless hunger for more. And suddenly, they stumbled upon a clear stream bubbling from a rocky spring, fresh water cascading over moss-covered stones, and they drank deeply, the cool liquid reviving their spirits, washing away the salt caked on their lips from the sea spray. And Hawkins filled a flask made from a gourd he found nearby, while Elias scouted ahead, climbing a small hill to survey the island, the view breathtaking with the ocean stretching endlessly, dotted with more islands in the distance, and no sign of the pirate ships, though he knew they couldn't be far, their fanaticism driving them relentlessly. And descending, he gathered fruits from low-hanging branches, mangoes ripe and juicy, their sweet flesh a welcome change from the hardtack of ship life. And as they sat to eat, sharing the bounty, Hawkins pulled out the map again, tracing the route with a gnarled finger, explaining that the atoll was still 2 days' sail if the winds favored them. But they needed to beware of the changing reefs, which the ancients had enchanted to shift, protecting the site from unworthy intruders, and only those with the journal's incantations could pass safely, reciting words that calmed the corals, preventing them from rising like spears to pierce hulls. And Elias, flipping through the journal's pages, found the relevant passage, the ink seemingly fresher here, as if the book itself was alive, adapting to the reader's needs. And he practiced the words under his breath, the strange syllables twisting his tongue, feeling a tingle in the air as if the magic responded even now, far from the source. And as the sun climbed higher, beating down with relentless heat, they decided to rest in the shade of a large banyan tree, its roots forming natural shelters like caves. And Elias dozed fitfully, dreams plaguing him of the serpent spirit coiling around his body, whispering temptations of power, gold beyond dreams, command over storms. But he resisted, waking in a sweat to find Hawkins watching over him, the old man's face etched with concern, admitting that he too had such dreams for years after his initiation, and only by stealing the map and fleeing did they lessen, but never fully vanish, a shadow on the soul that lingered. And to pass the time, Hawkins recounted more legends of the ancient pirates, how the rituals originated not in the Caribbean but were brought from the Old World, perhaps by Templars fleeing persecution, who had learned them from Arab scholars guarding secrets from Solomon's time. rituals to bind demons of the deep, using symbols that combined Kabbalah with pagan ruins, and these were adapted by seafarers, blended with native lore from the islands, where Arawak shamans spoke of sea spirits angry at the invaders, and the pirates, cunning as they were, incorporated these to strengthen their pacts, creating hybrids that allowed them to hide treasures in dimensions between worlds. Accessible only during certain lunar phases, and Elias, fascinated, asked if any had broken the curse before, and Hawkins shook his head, saying many tried, but most were consumed, their bones added to the altars as warnings. But there was one tale of a pirate queen who nearly succeeded, a woman named Bonnie in disguise, who infiltrated the Brotherhood, learned the secrets, and attempted the reverse ritual, but was betrayed by her lover, leading to her capture. Though some say she escaped and lived out her days in anonymity, her story inspiring hope that it could be done, and this gave Elias renewed determination, for if a woman in those harsh times could come close, then he, with the journal and map, had a chance. And as afternoon waned, they returned to the boat, launching it into the gentle surf, the waves lapping softly as if bidding them farewell, and setting sail once more, the wind filling the small sail, propelling them southwards, the islands fading behind like a dream. And the open sea embraced them, vast and unforgiving, with dolphins leaping alongside as if escorts, their clicks and whistles a cheerful contrast to the dark path ahead. And that night, under a canopy of stars that seemed brighter away from land, Elias took the first watch, the journal open on his lap, reading by the light of a small lantern, learning of lesser rituals used for daily advantages, like one to call fish into nets or to reveal hidden enemies through dreams, but he dared not try them, fearing even small magics would accelerate the curse, and Hawkins slept fitfully, muttering in his sleep about lost comrades, names like Black Sam and Calico Jack, famous pirates who were part of the Brotherhood, their legends masking the true horror of their bindings. And as dawn broke, painting the sky in pinks and oranges, a sail appeared on the horizon, not black but white, a merchant vessel perhaps, and Hawkins suggested hailing them for news or supplies, but Elias, cautious, noted the flag was Spanish, and in these waters, tensions ran high with privateers and pirates alike, but necessity drove them to approach, waving a white cloth to signal peace, and the ship, La Estrella, slowed, its captain, a stern man with a mustache twirled at the ends, shouting down in broken English, asking their business, and Hawkins spun a tale of being shipwrecked fishermen, begging for water and bread, and the captain, suspicious but compassionate, lowered a basket with provisions, including salted meat and wine, and in exchange, asked for news of pirate activity. For rumors of a cursed fleet had reached even Madrid, ships that vanished in fog and reappeared to strike without warning. And Elias, from the boat, shared what he could without revealing too much, warning of black sails with serpent flags, and the captain crossed himself, muttering about Diablo del Mar, the devil of the sea, and as they parted, the La Estrella, sailing east, Elias felt a pang of envy for their normal voyage, free from curses and rituals, but his path was set, and the provisions bolstered their strength, the wine warming their bellies as they toasted to success, though the toast rang hollow with the weight of uncertainty. And as the day progressed, clouds gathered, a storm brewing in the distance, thunder rumbling like the growls of beasts, and Hawkins, sniffing the air, said it was no natural storm, but one summoned by the pirates to slow them or force them off course, for the Brotherhood had rituals to control weather, chanting to the four winds with offerings of feathers and blood, and sure enough, the waves grew higher, the boat tossing like a leaf in a gale, rain lashing down in sheets that stung the skin, and Elias bailed frantically, water sloshing over the sides, while Hawkins steered, his experience keeping them afloat, shouting encouragement over the howl of the wind. And in the midst of the tempest, Elias glimpsed shapes in the waves, shadowy figures riding the foam, perhaps hallucinations or the spirits of the drowned come to claim them, and he recited the protective incantation from the journal. The words barely audible, but the storm lessened slightly, the clouds parting just enough to let moonlight through, and they rode it out, exhausted but alive, the boat damaged but reparable with strips of cloth and wood from a broken oar, and as calm returned, the sea mirror-like under the moon, Hawkins praised Elias's quick thinking, saying the counter-magic worked because his soul was still pure, not fully tainted, and this gave them hope for the final confrontation, and continuing on. They spotted the atoll the next day, a ring of coral barely above water, with a central lagoon shimmering like a jewel, and navigating the reefs. Elias chanted the words, the corals seeming to recede, opening a path like a gate, and anchoring in the lagoon. The water calm and clear, they swam ashore to a small sandy isle, where palm trees clustered around a cave mouth yawning like a maw, the entrance carved with ancient symbols that matched the journal, and inside, torchlight flickering from pitch they found. Revealed walls painted with scenes of rituals, men in circles, blood flowing, sea creatures rising, and at the back, an altar of black stone, etched with the serpent, and Hawkins explained this was the place where the first pact was made, and to break it, they must wait for the blood moon tomorrow night, offering the map and journal to the flames on the altar, along with a drop of blood from each, reciting the reverse chant to release the bound energy. But as they prepared, voices echoed from outside. The pirates had arrived, their ships slipping through the reefs with their own magic, and a landing party approached, led by the braided-beard captain, who called out Elias's name as if he knew it, revealing that the curse had whispered it to him, marking him as the chosen sacrifice for the renewal, and a tense standoff ensued. Elias and Hawkins hiding in the cave. Isabella. No, wait, in part 1 I didn't introduce Isabella, that was in my earlier thought. Stick to characters, so just Elias and Hawkins, barricading the entrance with rocks. But the pirates began digging, their shovels clanging, and Hawkins, leg wound reopening, urged Elias to perform the ritual early. But without the moon, it might not work, or worse, backfire, summoning the spirit uncontrollably. But with no choice, Elias lit the fire on the altar, burning the map first, flames leaping blue, and dripping blood, chanting backwards, the cave shaking as the spirit awakened prematurely. A roar filling the air, and the pirates outside screamed as tentacles of water rose from the lagoon, pulling some into the depths, and the leader burst in, sword drawn, lunging at Elias. But Hawkins intercepted, taking the blade to the chest, falling with a gasp, his last words urging Elias to finish, and Elias, grief-stricken, continued the chant, the journal burning last, the spirit manifesting as a massive serpent, coiling around the cave, its eyes locking on Elias, and in that moment, Elias offered not blood but forgiveness, a twist born of intuition, forgiving the ancient wrongs, and the spirit shuddered, dissolving into mist, the curse breaking with a wave of light that washed over the atoll, the pirates outside collapsing as their tattoos vanished, some weeping with relief, others fleeing in confusion, and Elias, dragging Hawkins's body out, buried him on the sand, a simple grave marked with a cross from driftwood, vowing to live a life worthy of the sacrifice. And sailing away on one of the pirate boats, the sea calm, the rituals ended, but the memories eternal, a tale of darkness overcome, and as the fog fully lifted, revealing the shimmering outline of a hidden archipelago, Elias Blackthorne and his weathered companion Hawkins, their small boat bobbing on the gentle waves, steered toward the largest island, its jagged cliffs rising like the teeth of some ancient beast, the air thick with the scent of salt and blooming jungle flowers, and Elias, clutching the journal that had become both his guide and burden, felt the faint burn of the serpent-shaped wound on his arm, a constant reminder of the curse creeping closer to his soul, while Hawkins, his face lined with years of regret, scanned the horizon for signs of the pursuing pirate sloop, its black sails a grim promise of the Brotherhood's relentless hunt, and as they landed on the sandy shore, dragging the boat into a sheltered cove where mangroves twisted like skeletal hands, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that the island itself was watching them, its dense foliage whispering secrets in the wind, and they ventured inland, following a narrow path lined with strange stones carved with symbols that matched those in the journal, hinting at an ancient presence older than the pirates, perhaps tied to the Arawak people who once thrived here before the invaders came. And Hawkins, his voice low and hoarse, began to share more about the Brotherhood's origins, explaining how the rituals weren't born in the Caribbean but carried across oceans by sailors from distant lands, Phoenicians who navigated by stars and made offerings to sea gods, their knowledge blending with Aztec blood rites brought by Spanish conquistadors, creating a dark fusion that empowered pirates to command the seas. And Elias, listening as they pushed through vines that seemed to coil tighter with each step, felt a chill at the thought of such ancient power, wondering how he, a mere sailor's son from a muddy English port, could hope to unravel it. But the journal's pages, yellowed and heavy with ink, spoke of a counter-ritual that could break the curse, requiring a pure heart and the destruction of the original altar at the atoll. And as they reached a clearing, they stumbled upon a ruined village. Huts collapsed under the weight of time, their wooden frames scorched as if by unnatural fire, and in the center stood a crude altar, its stones stained dark with what Elias feared was blood. Surrounded by bones arranged in patterns that echoed the serpent symbol, and Hawkins, his eyes narrowing, warned that this was a lesser ritual site, used by the Brotherhood to track their prey or summon minor boons, like the fog that had nearly trapped them. And as they searched the ruins for supplies, Elias found a hidden compartment beneath a fallen beam, containing a small leather pouch with a pearl the size of a gull's egg, its surface shimmering with an unnatural light, and the journal described such pearls as keys, harvested from sacred oysters guarded by sea spirits used to unlock hidden paths or treasures, and Elias, slipping it into his pocket, felt a surge of hope that this could aid their mission. But before they could explore further, a rustling in the jungle made them freeze, and out stepped a figure, not a pirate but a woman, her skin bronzed by the sun, her eyes sharp and wary, introducing herself as Mara, a runaway slave who had lived on the island for years, surviving by wit and knowledge of its secrets, and she recognized the pearl, warning them it was cursed, drawing the Brotherhood like moths to a flame, and Elias, hesitant but desperate for allies, shared their quest to break the ancient curse, and Mara, after a long pause, agreed to help, revealing she had seen the pirates' rituals from afar, their chants raising storms that sank ships, and she knew paths through the island that could evade detection, and together they moved deeper into the jungle. Mara leading them to a hidden spring where they refilled their flasks, the water cool and sweet, and she told tales of her escape from a plantation, how she learned herb craft and navigation from her grandmother, a healer who spoke of spirits in the sea, and Elias felt a kinship with her, both outsiders fighting against forces larger than themselves, and as night fell, they camped under a massive ceiba tree, its roots forming a natural fortress, and by firelight, Elias read more from the journal, learning of a ritual called the Binding of Tides, performed every century under a blood moon to renew the Brotherhood's pact, requiring a sacrifice of untainted blood. His blood, he realized with a shudder, the serpent mark pulsing as if in agreement, and the journal hinted at a way to disrupt it, by offering a counter-sacrifice, not of life but of will, surrendering the greed that fueled the rituals, a concept so abstract Elias struggled to grasp it, but Mara, listening, suggested it meant giving up the desire for power, something the pirates could never do. And Hawkins nodded, adding that the altar at the atoll was the key. Its destruction would sever the link to the sea spirits, but it was guarded by both men and magic, traps that could twist the mind or summon creatures from the deep. And as they planned, a distant drumbeat echoed through the trees, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat, and Mara's face paled, recognizing it as the Brotherhood's call, a signal that they were near, performing a tracking ritual, and they doused the fire, moving swiftly to a cave she knew, its entrance hidden by ferns, and inside, the walls glowed faintly with bioluminescent moss, casting eerie shadows as they caught their breath. And Mara explained that the island was a nexus, one of many sacred sites where the rituals drew power, connected by ley lines beneath the sea, a concept Elias barely understood but felt in his bones. The journal confirming with sketches of star charts and ocean currents that aligned with these points, and Hawkins, his strength waning from his old wound, urged Elias to memorize the counterchant, a series of words that felt like fire on his tongue, meant to weaken the altar's hold. And as they rested, Mara shared more about the island's history, how it was once a sanctuary for her people, who worshipped a sea goddess named Yamaya, whose blessings were twisted by the pirates into curses, and Elias, inspired, wondered if invoking Yamaya could aid them, a spark of hope against the darkness. But before they could plan further, the drums grew louder, closer, and Mara led them through a hidden tunnel, emerging near a cliff overlooking the sea, where they saw the pirate sloop anchored in the lagoon below, its crew chanting around a fire on the beach, their leader, the bearded captain with bones in his braids, holding the glowing amulet that seemed to pulse in time with the drums, and Elias, peering through the journal, found a passage warning of the amulet's power, forged from a meteor's heart, capable of summoning the sea's wrath or calming it, depending on the wielder's intent, and they decided to steal it, a risky plan but necessary, as it could tip the balance at the atoll. And Mara, agile and silent, led them down a winding path to the beach, where they crept past sleeping guards, the air thick with the scent of burning herbs, part of the ritual, and Elias, heart pounding, slipped into the captain's tent, finding the amulet on a makeshift altar. But as he reached for it, a trap sprang a net of vines ensnaring him, and he shouted for Mara and Hawkins, who fought off waking pirates, their blades clashing in the moonlight, and Elias, cutting himself free with a knife, grabbed the amulet, its warmth burning his hand, and they fled back into the jungle, pursued by shouts and gunfire, the pirates enraged at the theft, and as they reached the boat, launching it into the surf, a storm broke overhead, lightning illuminating the chaos, and Elias realized the amulet was amplifying the weather, uncontrolled in his untrained hands, and Hawkins, steering through crashing waves, shouted for him to wrap it in cloth to dampen its power, which worked, the storm easing slightly, and they sailed away, the island shrinking behind them, but the pirates' smaller boats followed, relentless, and over the next day, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse, weaving through reefs and shallows, Mara's knowledge of the waters giving them an edge. And by nightfall, they lost their pursuers in a maze of coral, anchoring in a hidden cove to repair the boat and plan, and Elias, studying the amulet, noticed its runes matched the journals, suggesting it was part of the original ritual, perhaps the key to the altar's destruction, and Mara, examining it, said her grandmother spoke of such objects, relics of gods stolen by men, and they must be returned to the sea to restore balance, and Hawkins, coughing from exhaustion, revealed more about his past, how he tried to destroy the Brotherhood once before, but lacked the courage to face the final ritual, abandoning his crew to their fate, a guilt that haunted him, and Elias, moved by his honesty, vowed not to falter, even as the serpent mark burned hotter, visions of underwater temples flashing in his mind, where ghostly pirates chanted, their eyes hollow, and he shook them off, focusing on the journal's instructions, which detailed a path through the atoll's reefs, navigable only during a specific tide, and as they sailed on, the sea growing restless, they encountered a derelict ship, its hull encrusted with barnacles, drifting aimlessly, and boarding it, they found maps and logs hinting at other ritual sites, scattered across the Caribbean, each guarding a piece of the Brotherhood's power, and Elias realized the atoll was just the beginning, a central node in a vast network, and destroying it might weaken but not end the curse. A daunting prospect, but before they could ponder further, a cannon shot rang out, the pirate sloop reappearing, having tracked them through the amulet's faint glow, and a fierce battle ensued, Elias and Mara manning the boat's small swivel gun, firing grapeshot to keep boarders at bay, while Hawkins steered, his strength fading, and in the chaos, Elias used the amulet, chanting a half-remembered phrase, summoning a wave that pushed the pirates back, but it drained him, the serpent mark pulsing painfully, and they escaped. Limping towards the atoll, now visible as a faint ring on the horizon, and landing at dusk, they found the cave from Part 2, its altar waiting, but the blood moon was still a night away, and they hid, preparing for the final ritual, knowing the pirates would come, drawn by the amulet and Elias's blood, and as they waited, Mara taught Elias a prayer to Yemaya, a plea for protection, and Hawkins, weaker now, gave him a locket, a keepsake from his daughter, lost to the curse years ago, asking Elias to carry it as a reminder of what they fought for, and as the moon rose, casting red light over the lagoon, the pirates arrived, their chants echoing, and Elias, clutching the amulet and journal, stepped forward, ready to face the darkness, his heart pounding with the weight of destiny, the suspense thicker than ever, as the ancient rituals of the pirates loomed closer, their secrets unraveling one bloody thread at a time, but the story was far from over. Continuing into the next part with the blood moon high dot casting its eerie red glow over the lagoon, bathing the atoll in a crimson light that seemed to pulse like a living heart, and Elias Blackthorne, standing at the mouth of the cave, the journal clutched tightly in one hand and the glowing amulet in the other, felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him, the serpent mark on his arm burning hotter than ever, as if the curse itself knew the final hour was near, and Mara, her eyes sharp with determination, stood beside him, her dagger drawn, ready to defend their fragile hope, while Hawkins, weakened by his wounds and the toll of years carrying the Brotherhood's curse, leaned against the cave wall, his breast shallow but his spirit unbroken, urging Elias to prepare for the counter-ritual, the only chance to break the ancient pact that bound the pirates to the sea's dark spirits. And as the chants of the approaching brotherhood grew louder, their voices rising in a haunting cadence that echoed through the coral-ringed atoll, Elias flipped through the journal's weathered pages, the ink seeming to shimmer under the blood moon's light, revealing the final steps of the counter-ritual, which required not just the burning of the journal and the map, but a spoken vow to renounce all greed and power, a sacrifice of the heart that the pirates, consumed by their lust for gold and dominion, could never make. And Mara, glancing at the amulet, whispered that its power could amplify their chant. But only if Elias's will remain pure, untainted by the curse's seductive pull. And as they prepared, arranging driftwood and dried seaweed on the black stone altar, the air grew heavy, thick with the scent of salt and something darker, like blood and decay, and the lagoon outside began to churn, waves rising without wind, as if the sea itself sensed the impending clash, and Elias, his heart pounding, recited the protective prayer to Yamaya that Mara had taught him. The words feeling like a shield against the oppressive atmosphere, and Hawkins, mustering his strength, added his own whispered chant, a plea for forgiveness for his past sins, hoping to lend power to their cause, and suddenly, the cave trembled, loose pebbles falling from the ceiling, as the pirate captain, his beard braided with bones and his eyes glowing with fanatic zeal, appeared at the entrance, flanked by his men, their swords gleaming and tattoos pulsing in sync with the amulet's light, and he called out to Elias, his voice both commanding and mocking, declaring that the boy's blood was the final key to renew the binding of tides, a ritual that would strengthen the brotherhood for another century, ensuring their dominion over the seas. And Elias, gripping the amulet tighter, felt its warmth surge, almost burning his palm, and he realized it was responding to the captain's presence, as if drawn to the original pact. And Mara, quick as a shadow, threw a handful of sand to distract the pirates, giving Elias a moment to light the fire on the altar, the flames leaping up in unnatural hues of blue and green, fueled by the seaweed and the journal's pages, which he reluctantly tossed in, watching the words of ancient magic curl and blacken. And as the smoke rose, the cave filled with a low hum, like the drone of 1,000 voices, and the pirates hesitated, sensing the shift, but the captain pressed forward, his amulet glowing brighter, and he began to chant, his words clashing with Elias's, creating a dissonance that made the air crackle, and Hawkins, staggering forward, handed Elias the locket, his daughter's keepsake, whispering that it held a spark of love, the only force stronger than the curse's greed. And Elias, inspired, tucked it into his shirt, feeling its weight against his heart, and he continued the counter-chant, his voice growing stronger, the words flowing like a river, and Mara joined in, her voice blending with his, invoking Yamaya's name, and the lagoon outside roared, waves crashing against the coral, sending sprays of foam into the air, and the pirates, some faltering, others pressing forward, began to falter as the altar's glow intensified, the black stone cracking under the strain of opposing magics. And Elias, sensing the moment, held up the amulet, its light now blinding, and spoke the vow, renouncing all desire for power, wealth, or control, offering instead his will to protect the innocent, like Hawkins's daughter, like Mara's people. And the cave shook violently, the serpent's spirit manifesting as a massive shadow, its coils filling the space, its eyes like twin moons staring into Elias's soul. And for a moment, he felt its temptation, visions of gold-laden ships and storms, bending to his command, but he pushed them away, clutching the locket, and the spirit roared, a sound that shook the atoll, and the captain, enraged, lunged forward, his sword aimed at Elias's heart, but Mara intercepted, her dagger clashing with his blade, and in the chaos, Hawkins threw himself at the captain, taking a blow meant for Elias, falling to the ground with a cry, and Elias, tears in his eyes, pressed on, chanting louder, the amulet now burning so hot it scorched his hand, and he dropped it onto the altar, where it melted into the flames, releasing a burst of light that blinded everyone, and the serpent spirit dissolved, its power broken, the pirates collapsing as their tattoos faded, some weeping, others staring blankly, freed from the curse but lost without its purpose, and the captain, his strength waning, cursed Elias, vowing the brotherhood would rise again, before fleeing into the night. His men scattering, and Elias, kneeling beside Hawkins, found the old man barely alive, his final words a blessing, urging Elias to live free of the darkness, and Mara helped him bury Hawkins under the blood moon's fading light, using coral and driftwood to mark the grave, and as dawn broke, the lagoon calm once more, they salvaged a small boat from the pirates' wreckage, setting sail with the journal's ashes still clinging to Elias's hands, the curse broken but the weight of their journey heavy on his heart, and Mara, steering by the stars, spoke of returning to her people, to rebuild what the invaders had destroyed, and Elias, looking at the horizon, wondered if the Brotherhood's other ritual sites still held power, for the journal had hinted at a network spanning the Caribbean, each node a potential threat, and he vowed to seek them out, to ensure no one else fell to the dark rituals. And as they sailed, a gentle breeze carrying them forward, Elias felt a new purpose. Not just to survive but to protect, to honor Hawkins's sacrifice and Mara's courage. And the sea, once a place of fear, now seemed to whisper encouragement, as if Yemaya herself approved, stretching endlessly under a sky painted with the soft hues of dawn, where the first rays of sunlight glinted off the waves like scattered gold, and Elias Blackthorne, standing at the bow of the small boat salvaged from the pirates' wreckage, felt the weight of Hawkins's locket against his chest. A bittersweet reminder of the old man's sacrifice, while Mara, her hands steady on the tiller, guided them through the gentle swells, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit, her face etched with determination to return to her people and rebuild what the invaders had torn apart, and Elias, his arms still throbbing from the serpent-shaped wound, now faded but not gone, as if the curse lingered in his blood despite the ritual's success at the atoll, clutched the pearl they had found on the island. Its unnatural shimmer a quiet promise of secrets yet to be uncovered, and as the boat glided through the Caribbean waters, surrounded by the endless blue that hid both beauty and terror, Elias's mind wandered to the journal's ashes, scattered to the winds, and the cryptic hints it left of other ritual sites, a network of dark power stretching across the seas, each one a potential spark to reignite the Brotherhood's curse, and he vowed to find them, to ensure no one else would suffer as Hawkins had, or be hunted as he was, and Mara, sensing his resolve, shared stories of her grandmother, a healer who spoke of ancient spirits that guarded the islands, not just Yemaya but others, like Alakan, the deep-sea ruler whose wrath could sink fleets, and she wondered aloud if the Brotherhood's rituals had angered these spirits, twisting their blessings into curses, and Elias, intrigued, asked if they could seek Alakan's aid, perhaps to cleanse the remaining sites, and Mara nodded, her eyes bright with hope, explaining that her grandmother's teachings included chants to appease the deep ones, though they required offerings of truth and purity, not blood, and as they sailed, the wind picking up, filling the small sail with a steady push, they spotted a distant speck on the horizon, not a ship but an island, smaller than the last, its shores fringed with jagged coral that gleamed like teeth in the sunlight, and Mara suggested they stop to resupply. For their water was low and the boat's hull had taken damage in the storm, and Elias agreed, though his heart raced with unease, for every island seemed to hold new dangers, and as they approached, the water grew clearer, revealing schools of fish darting beneath, their scales flashing like jewels, and they anchored in a shallow cove, dragging the boat onto a beach of soft white sand, where palm trees swayed and crabs scuttled, leaving tiny tracks like hieroglyphs, and venturing inland, they found a narrow path winding through dense jungle, the air thick with the scent of orchids and damp earth, and Elias, ever cautious, kept his knife ready, the pearl tucked safely in his pocket, its warmth a strange comfort, and Mara led the way, her knowledge of plants guiding them to a freshwater stream, where they filled their flasks and bathed their faces, the cool water washing away the salt and grime of days at sea, and as they rested, Elias noticed carvings on nearby rocks, not the serpent symbol but older, more intricate designs. Spirals and waves that seemed to tell a story of creation, of seas rising, and gods walking among men, and Mara, tracing them with her fingers, said they were Arawak, from a time before the Spanish came, when her people lived in harmony with the spirits, and she whispered a prayer, her voice soft but strong, asking for guidance, and the air seemed to lighten, as if the island approved, and they pressed on, hoping to find food or materials to patch the boat, but soon they heard a low hum, like the buzz of distant bees, and Mara froze, recognizing it as the sound of a ritual, not the Brotherhood's but something older, and following the sound, they crept through the jungle, hiding behind broad leaves, until they reached a clearing where a circle of stones stood, each carved with the same spirals, and in the center, a lone figure knelt, an old man with skin like weathered leather, his hair white as sea foam, chanting in a tongue Elias didn't know, his hands raised to the sky, and around him, the ground shimmered, as if the air itself danced, and Mara whispered that he was a shaman, one of the last of her people, performing a rite to calm the spirits, and they watched, mesmerized, as he poured water from a gourd onto the stones, the liquid glowing faintly, and the hum grew louder, vibrating in Elias's chest, and he felt the pearl in his pocket pulse in time, as if answering the chant, and the shaman, sensing their presence, turned, his eyes piercing but kind, and he beckoned them forward. Unafraid, and Mara stepped out, speaking in her native tongue, explaining their quest, and the shaman, whose name was Tino, listened gravely, his gaze lingering on Elias's arm, where the faded serpent mark still showed, and he spoke in halting English, saying the curse was not fully broken, for the Brotherhood's network of altars kept it alive, and the pearl was a key, but also a beacon, drawing both allies and enemies, and he offered to help, revealing that this island was a sanctuary, a place where the old spirits still held sway, and he could teach them a rite to shield the pearl's power, making it harder for the pirates to track, and Elias, grateful but wary, agreed, and they followed Tino to a hidden grove, where a small altar of coral and shells stood, surrounded by flowers that glowed faintly in the dusk, and he began a ceremony, burning herbs that filled the air with sweet smoke, chanting words that made the ground tremble, and Elias felt the pearl cool in his pocket, its light dimming, and Tino explained that the shield would last only until the next full moon, giving them time to reach another ritual site, one he knew of, on an island called Cayo Somber, where the Brotherhood had buried a chest sealed with blood, guarded by illusions that drove men mad, and Mara, her eyes wide, asked if Yamaya or Alakan could protect them there. And Tino nodded, saying the spirits favored those who sought balance, not power, and he gave them a small vial of seawater, blessed by his chant, to sprinkle on the chest if they found it, to weaken its curse, and as night deepened, they shared a meal of roasted fish and mangoes, Tino's tales of the old ways weaving a tapestry of gods and heroes, of seas that sang and skies that wept, and Elias, listening, felt a connection to something larger, a history that stretched beyond his own life. And he dreamed that night of underwater cities, their spires glowing with coral light, where spirits danced and whispered his name, and he woke with a start, the pearl warm again, as if warning of danger, and sure enough, as dawn broke, they spotted sails on the horizon, not the black flags of the Brotherhood but a Spanish galleon, its cannons gleaming, and Mara cursed softly, saying the Spanish hunted runaways like her, and they might see Elias as a pirate, and they hurried to the boat, launching it into the surf, the blessed vial tucked safely with the pearl, and as they sailed, the galleon gave chase, its speed surprising for such a large ship, and Elias, steering now, wove through shallow waters, hoping to lose them among the reefs. But the Spanish were skilled, their navigator reading the currents like a book, and cannon fire echoed, sending plumes of water skyward, and Mara, quick thinking, suggested using the pearl. Its power perhaps able to summon a fog, as the journal had described such tricks, and Elias, desperate, held it aloft, speaking words from Tino's chant, and the air thickened, a mist rising from the sea, cloaking them from view, but it drained him, the serpent mark flaring, and he collapsed, the pearl slipping from his hand, and Mara caught it, wrapping it in cloth to dampen its power, and they drifted in the fog, the galleon's shouts fading, and when the mist cleared, they were alone. The island a distant speck, but the boat was leaking, damaged by a near miss, and they landed on a tiny quay to repair it, using palm fronds and sap to patch the hull, and Mara, checking Elias's wound, saw the serpent mark darkening again, as if the pearl's use had rekindled the curse, and she urged him to rest, but Elias, driven by Hawkins's memory, refused, studying the journal's ashes in his mind, recalling hints of Cayo Somber, a place of shadows where the Brotherhood hid their darkest treasures, and Tino's words echoed, warning of illusions that could trap them forever, and as they set sail again, the sea growing restless, waves slapping the boat like angry hands, they spotted a derelict sloop, its sails torn, drifting aimlessly, and boarding it, they found bodies, not decayed but frozen in terror, their eyes wide, as if seeing something horrific, and Mara, whispering a prayer to Yamaya, found a logbook, its pages detailing a failed attempt to raid Cayo Somber. the crew driven mad by visions of their worst fears, and Elias, reading it, felt a chill, for the log mentioned a chest that sang, its voice luring men to their doom, and he wondered if the vial could silence it, or if they were sailing into a trap. And as they approached Cayo Sombre, its shores shrouded in unnatural twilight despite the midday sun, the air grew cold, and whispers filled their ears, not from the wind but from within, and Elias saw visions of his family, burning in a fire he couldn't reach. And Mara clutched her head, muttering about chains and whips, her past rising to haunt her, and they fought through the illusions, anchoring off the island, and stepping ashore. The sand felt wrong, shifting underfoot like living flesh, and they followed a path to a cave, its entrance guarded by stone statues of sea creatures, their eyes glowing with malevolent light, and inside, the chest waited, its surface carved with runes that pulsed, and Elias, sprinkling the vial's water, began the counter-chant. But the chest opened on its own, revealing not gold, but a mirror, reflecting their faces twisted with fear, and the whispers grew louder, urging them to give in, to join the Brotherhood. But Mara, clutching Elias's hand, sang Yemaya's prayer, and the mirror cracked, the illusions fading, and they sealed the chest, dragging it to the sea, where it sank, the water calming, and they sailed away, the island fading. But Elias knew the Brotherhood would come, drawn by the pearl, and as night fell, stars bright above, he felt the locket's weight, vowing to end the curse's network, one sight at a time, twinkling like ancient sentinels in the vast Caribbean night, their light reflecting off the calm sea as Elias Blackthorne stood at the helm of their small, weathered boat, the locket from Hawkins pressed against his heart, its weight a solemn reminder of the sacrifices made to break the Brotherhood's curse at the atoll, and Mara, her hands steady on the sail's ropes, her eyes sharp despite the fatigue etched into her face, navigated by the constellations, her knowledge of the stars learned from her grandmother, a healer who saw the sky as a map of the gods' will, and Elias, his arms still tingling from the fading serpent mark, which seemed to pulse faintly as if the curse lingered like a shadow in his blood, held the pearl tightly, its dim glow shielded by Taino's ritual but still warm, a silent beacon of secrets yet to unravel. And as they sailed through the endless expanse of water, the gentle lapping of waves against the hull a deceptive lullaby, Elias's thoughts drifted to the journal's ashes, scattered into the sea, and the cryptic warnings of other ritual sites, a network of dark altars stretching across the islands, each one a thread in the Brotherhood's web of power, and he swore to himself, under the watchful stars, to hunt them down, to ensure no one else would fall to the ancient rituals that had claimed so many. And Mara, sensing his resolve, spoke softly of her people's legends, tales of Alakan the deep sea deity whose wrath could churn the ocean into chaos, and how the Brotherhood's rites had twisted such spirits' blessings into curses, binding them to human greed, and she wondered if they could find another sanctuary, like Taino's island, where the old gods still held sway, to strengthen their fight. And Elias nodded, his mind racing with the possibility of invoking Alakan's aid, though he feared the cost, for every ritual, even a pure one, seemed to demand something, will, truth, or even a piece of the soul. And as the night deepened, the air growing cooler, they spotted a faint glow on the horizon, not the dawn but an island, its shores lined with bioluminescent algae that shimmered like a carpet of stars, and Mara, her voice tinged with awe, said it was Isla Luminosa, a place her grandmother spoke of, where the spirits of the sea and sky met, a sacred ground untouched by the Brotherhood's taint, and they decided to land. Their water and food supplies dwindling, the boat's patched hull creaking under the strain of their journey, and as they approached, the water glowed brighter, fish darting beneath like living flames, and they anchored in a sheltered cove, dragging the boat onto a beach where the sand sparkled under the starlight, and venturing inland, they followed a path lined with glowing shells, their light guiding them through a jungle alive with the hum of insects and the calls of night birds. And Elias, his knife at the ready, felt the pearl in his pocket pulse, as if responding to the island's energy. And Mara led the way, her steps sure, her eyes scanning for signs of danger, for even a sacred place could hide perils. And soon they reached a clearing where a spring bubbled, its water glowing faintly, surrounded by stones carved with symbols of waves and stars, not the Brotherhood's serpent but something older, purer. And Mara knelt, whispering a prayer to Yemaya, her voice blending with the night's sounds. And Elias felt a warmth spread through him, as if the island welcomed them, and they drank from the spring, the water sweet and refreshing, washing away the salt and exhaustion of days at sea, and as they rested, Elias noticed a cave nearby, its entrance framed by vines that glowed softly, and inside, they found paintings on the walls, vivid scenes of Arawak ceremonies, men and women dancing under the moon, offering shells and pearls to the sea, and Mara, tracing the images, said this was a place of balance, where her people once communed with the spirits, and she suggested they perform a cleansing ritual, to strengthen their resolve and shield them from the curse's lingering grasp, and Elias agreed, though his heart raced with uncertainty, for every ritual seemed to pull him deeper into a world of magic he barely understood, and they gathered materials, shells, flowers, and driftwood, building a small altar by the spring, and Mara led the chant, her voice strong, invoking Yemaya and Alakan, asking for clarity and protection, and Elias joined in, his voice hesitant at first but growing steadier, the pearl in his pocket cooling as if soothed, and the air shimmered, the spring's glow brightening, and for a moment, Elias saw visions, not of terror but of hope, his family safe in England, Mara's people rebuilding their lives, and he felt a surge of purpose, but the peace was short-lived, for a low drumbeat echoed through the jungle, not the Brotherhood's but something different, wilder, and Mara's eyes widened, recognizing it as a warning from the island's spirits, and they hurried to the cave, hiding as figures emerged from the shadows, not pirates but warriors, their bodies painted with glowing pigments, their eyes fierce but not hostile, and their leader, a woman with feathers woven into her hair, introduced herself as Kalia, a guardian of Isla Luminosa, descended from the Arawak who protected the island's sanctity, and she sensed the pearl's power, demanding to know their purpose, and Mara, speaking in her native tongue, explained their quest to end the Brotherhood's curse, showing the vial from Taino, and Kalia's expression softened, revealing that her people had long fought the Brotherhood's influence, their rituals clashing with the pirates' dark rites, and she offered to guide them to a hidden shrine deeper in the island, where they could strengthen the pearl's shield and learn of another ritual site, on an island called Punta Negra, where the Brotherhood hid a blade forged from the same meteor as the amulet, a weapon that could either empower or destroy their altars, and Elias, wary but hopeful, agreed, and they followed Kalia through winding paths, the jungle alive with glowing creatures, fireflies dancing like stars, and the shrine, a cavern lit by crystals that pulsed like heartbeats, held an altar of coral and pearl, and Kalia performed a ritual, weaving chants with Maras, the air humming with power. And Elias felt the serpent mark fade further, though not vanish, as if the curse clung stubbornly to his soul, and Kalia gave them a map, carved on a turtle shell, showing the way to Punta Negra, warning that the blade was guarded by the Brotherhood's most fanatical members, men who had surrendered their humanity entirely to the curse. And as they prepared to leave, a storm broke, not summoned by the Brotherhood but by the island itself, as if testing their resolve, and they sheltered in the shrine, rain pounding outside. And Kalia shared tales of her ancestors, who fought Spanish invaders and pirate raiders alike, their spirits still guarding the island, and Elias, listening, felt a connection to their struggle, his own fight mirroring theirs, and he dreamed that night of the blade, glowing red in a dark cave, whispering his name, and he woke to find the storm past, the sky clear, but the pearl warm again, its shield weakening, and Kalia urged them to hurry, for the Brotherhood would sense it. And they returned to the boat, launching into the sea, the turtle shell map guiding them toward Punta Negra, but as they sailed, a shadow loomed, not a ship but a massive creature, a whale or something darker, its fin breaking the surface, and Mara, chanting to Alakan, calmed it, the creature diving deep. But the encounter left Elias shaken, for the journal had warned of sea guardians bound to the Brotherhood, and as they neared Punta Negra, its shores black with volcanic sand, the air grew heavy, and whispers filled their minds, not illusions but memories of the Brotherhood's victims, crying for release, and they landed, hiding the boat in a cave, and followed the map to a cliffside temple, its entrance carved with serpents and skulls, and inside, the blade rested on an altar, its edge glowing faintly, but as Elias reached for it, the ground shook, and figures emerged, not pirates but shadows, spectral forms of past sacrifices, their eyes hollow, and Mara, clutching the vial, sprinkled its water, weakening them, and Elias grabbed the blade, its touch burning, and they fled, pursued by the shadows, which dissolved in the sunlight, and back at the boat, they sailed away, the blade wrapped in cloth, its power unstable, and Elias, feeling its weight, knew the Brotherhood would come, drawn by the blade and pearl, and as night fell, the stars brighter than ever, he vowed to destroy the remaining altars, one by one, to honor Hawkins, Mara, and Kalia, and the sea whispered back a promise of trials ahead, casting a faint, eerie red hue across the small boat's weathered deck as Elias Blackthorn stood at the bow, the meteor-forged blade wrapped tightly in cloth but still warm in his hands, its power humming like a distant storm, while Mara, her face set with resolve, adjusted the sail to catch the night's gentle breeze, her eyes fixed on the stars above, navigating by their ancient patterns as her grandmother had taught her, and Elias, feeling the locket from Hawkins against his chest and the pearl in his pocket pulsing faintly, as if in rhythm with the blade, sensed the serpent mark on his arm stir, no longer burning but tingling, a reminder that the curse, though weakened at the atoll, still lingered in his blood, tying him to the Brotherhood's dark legacy. And as they sailed through the Caribbean's endless waters, the sea shimmering under the starlight like a mirror of the heavens, Elias's mind churned with the weight of their quest. The turtle-shell map from Kalia guiding them toward another ritual site, an island called La Isla de las Sombras, where the Brotherhood had hidden a relic said to bind the winds, a conch shell carved with runes that could summon gales or calm storms, and he wondered if destroying it would further unravel the network of altars, or if it would awaken new dangers, for the journal's ashes, though gone, had left memories in his mind, cryptic warnings of guardians, both human and otherworldly, that protected the Brotherhood's secrets, and Mara, sensing his unease, spoke of her people's tales, how the Arawak revere the winds as spirits of change, not to be controlled but respected, and how the Brotherhood's rituals had angered them, twisting their power into chaos, and she suggested they seek guidance from a priestess she had heard of, an old woman named Izel who lived on a nearby quay, said to commune with the winds and sea, and Elias, clutching the blade tighter, agreed. For every ally strengthened their chances against the Brotherhood, whose black-sailed sloop could appear at any moment, drawn by the pearl's faint glow or the blade's restless energy. And as dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, they spotted a small island, its shores fringed with mangroves and dotted with herons that stood like sentinels, and they anchored in a quiet cove, the water so clear they could see coral blooming beneath, and dragging the boat ashore, they hid it among the roots. The blade and pearl tucked safely in Elias's satchel, and they ventured inland, following a path of crushed shells that gleamed like pearls, the air thick with the scent of salt and jasmine, and soon they reached a small hut, its walls woven from palm fronds, where an old woman sat, her hair silver and eyes clouded but sharp, stirring a pot of herbs that filled the air with a spicy aroma, and she introduced herself as Izel, her voice like the rustle of leaves, and Mara, bowing respectfully, explained their mission, showing the turtleshell map and the vial from Tino, and Izel listened, her fingers tracing the map's carvings, and she nodded gravely, saying La Isla de las Sombras was a place of great power, where the Brotherhood had bound a wind spirit named Huracan, not to be confused with the storms but a deity of balance, now twisted into a force of destruction, and she offered to teach them a chant to appease Huracan, a song of respect that could weaken the conch's hold, but it required a pure heart, untainted by vengeance, and Elias, his thoughts drifting to Hawkins' sacrifice and the Brotherhood's cruelty, struggled with this, for anger simmered in him, but Izel, sensing his conflict, placed a hand on his arm, her touch cool, and said the blade he carried was both a weapon and a test, for its power could corrupt as easily as it could destroy, and she led them to a clearing, where a small altar of shells and stones stood, surrounded by flowers that swayed without wind, and there, under the rising sun, she began a ritual, burning herbs and singing in a tongue that felt ancient, the words wrapping around Elias like a breeze, and Mara joined in, her voice blending seamlessly, while Elias, hesitant, added his own, the blade in his hands growing lighter, as if approving, and the pearl cooled, its shield strengthened by Izel's power, and she gave them a small pouch of dried herbs, to burn when they reached the island, to call Huracan's favor, and as they ate a meal of fish and breadfruit, Izel shared stories of the winds, how they carried the voices of the dead, whispering warnings or blessings, and Elias, listening, felt the locket warm against his chest, as if Hawkins' spirit lingered, urging him on, and that night, they slept in the hut, but Elias's dreams were troubled, filled with visions of La Isla de las Sombras, its shores shrouded in mist, where shadows moved with human shapes but no faces, and he woke to the sound of distant thunder. Not a natural storm but one summoned, and Izel, already awake, said the Brotherhood was near, their rituals stirring the winds, and they hurried to the boat, launching it into the surf, the sea restless, waves slapping the hull, and as they sailed, the thunder grew louder, clouds gathering like a dark army, and Mara, chanting Izel's song, calmed the waves slightly. But the pearl began to glow, its shield weakening, and Elias wrapped it tighter, fearing it would draw the pirates, and sure enough, a black sail appeared. The Brotherhood's sloop cutting through the water, its crew chanting, their voices carried by the wind, and Elias, gripping the blade, felt its power surge, tempting him to use it, to summon a storm of his own, but he resisted, remembering Izel's warning, and instead, Mara steered them into a maze of reefs, the shallow waters slowing the sloop, and they escaped, but not before a cannon shot grazed the boat, splintering the mast, and they limped to a tiny quay. Repairing it with driftwood and vines, and Mara, checking Elias's arm, saw the serpent mark darkening again, as if the blade's use had stirred the curse, and she urged him to rest. But Elias, driven by the locket's weight, refused, studying the turtleshell map, which showed La Isla de las Sombras as a jagged crescent, its center a lagoon where the conch was hidden, guarded by Huracan's wrath. And as they sailed again, the sea grew darker, the stars hidden by clouds, and whispers filled the air, not from the wind but from within, memories of the Brotherhood's victims, their voices pleading for release, and Elias, clutching the locket, fought them off, focusing on Izel's chant, and when they reached the island, its shores black with volcanic ash, the air was heavy, the jungle silent except for a low hum, like a heartbeat, and they hid the boat in a cave, following the map to a temple carved into a cliff, its entrance framed by statues of wind gods, their faces twisted in anger, and inside, the conch rested on an altar, its surface glowing with runes. But as Elias reached for it, the wind howled, a gust knocking him back, and shadows emerged, not spirits but living pirates, their tattoos pulsing, led by a new captain, a woman with eyes like storm clouds, who called herself Seraphina, claiming to be the Brotherhood's new leader, risen after the Adol's fall, and she demanded the blade and pearl, saying they were keys to Huracan's full power, and a fight broke out, Mara wielding her dagger, Elias the blade, its edge cutting through the air with unnatural force, and they drove the pirates back. But Seraphina chanted, summoning a gale that shook the temple, and Elias, burning Izel's herbs, countered with her song, the conch's glow dimming, and he grabbed it, its weight heavy with power, and they fled, the temple collapsing behind them, rocks falling like thunder, and back at the boat, they sailed away, the conch wrapped with the blade, its hum quieting, but Seraphina's ship followed, her voice carried by the wind, vowing revenge, and Elias, feeling the locket and the pearl, knew the fight was far from over, the network of altars still pulsing, and as dawn broke, the stars fading, he vowed to destroy them all, for Hawkins, for Mara, for Izel, and the sea whispered back, a promise of trials yet to come, and thus part 7 drew to a close, but the tale was far from over, continuing into the next part with the conch's hum guiding their way, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to echo through the small boat's hull as Elias Blackthorn stood at the bow. The meteor-forged blade and the conch wrapped tightly in cloth beside him, their combined power pulsing like a heartbeat, while Mara, her hands callous from days at the tiller, steered through the Caribbean's restless waters, her eyes locked on the horizon where stars faded into the pre-dawn glow, her face etched with both exhaustion and unyielding resolve, and Elias, feeling the weight of Hawkins's locket against his chest, the pearl in his pocket still warm despite Izel's shielding ritual, and the serpent mark on his arm tingling faintly, as if the curse clung to him like a shadow, knew that their victory at La Isla de las Sombras was only a step in a larger battle, for the Brotherhood's network of ritual sites still stretched across the seas, each altar a knot in a web of dark magic that threatened to ensnare them again. And he clutched the turtleshell map from Kalia, its carvings worn but clear, pointing to the next destination, an island called Cueva de los Muertos, where the Brotherhood had hidden a relic known as the Eye of the Abyss, a gem said to see through time, granting visions of past and future to those who dared wield it, and Elias, his mind heavy with the journal's lost warnings, wondered if this relic could reveal the locations of the remaining altars, or if it would tempt him with power, as the blade and conch had, testing his heart's purity. And Mara, sensing his thoughts, spoke of her grandmother's tales, how the Arawak revered the stars as eyes of the gods, watching over the world, and how the Brotherhood's rituals had blinded those eyes, turning their gaze into curses. And she suggested they seek another ally, a navigator named Mateo, rumored to live on a nearby cay, a man who had once sailed with the Spanish but fled after witnessing a Brotherhood ritual. And Elias, gripping the locket, agreed, for every friend strengthened their fight against Seraphina's relentless pursuit, her black-sailed sloop a constant threat, drawn by the relic's power. And as the sun rose, painting the sea in hues of gold and crimson, they spotted a small island, its shores fringed with coral reefs that sparkled like broken glass, and they anchored in a sheltered cove, the water so clear they could see fish darting among the coral, their scales flashing like coins, and dragging the boat ashore. They hid it among mangroves, their roots twisting like the serpent symbol, and ventured inland, following a path of smooth pebbles that led to a village of thatched huts, where children played and women wove baskets, and an old man, his face lined like a map, greeted them, introducing himself as Mateo, his eyes sharp despite his age. And Mara, speaking in Spanish, explained their quest, showing the turtleshell map and the vial from Taino. And Mateo listened, his fingers tracing the map's lines, and he nodded, his voice low, saying Cueva de los Muertos was a place of death, where the Brotherhood had bound a spirit of time, not a god but a force, twisted into a tool of control, and he offered to join them, for he had seen the eye's power, used by the Brotherhood to predict their enemies' moves, and he knew a chant to shield against its visions, learned from a native healer who saved him from madness. And Elias, wary but hopeful, accepted, and they shared a meal of roasted plantains and fish. Mateo's tales of his days as a navigator painting a picture of a sea alive with wonders and terrors, and he spoke of the Brotherhood's rituals, how they'd burn bones and blood to summon visions, their chants echoing through storms. And Elias, listening, felt the locket warm, as if Hawkins approved. And that night, they slept in the village, but Elias's dreams were haunted by the eye, a gem glowing in a dark cave, showing him futures where he failed, the Brotherhood rising again. And he woke, sweating, to find Mateo watching the sea, his face grim, saying a storm was coming, not natural but summoned. And they hurried to the boat, launching it into the surf, the relics secured. And as they sailed, the sky darkened, clouds swirling like a vortex, and Mara, chanting Izel's song, calmed the waves slightly. But the pearl glowed brighter, its shield faltering, and Elias wrapped it tighter, fearing it would draw Seraphina. And sure enough, black sails appeared, the sloop cutting through the storm, its crew's chants carried by the wind. And Elias, gripping the blade, felt its power surge, tempting him to summon a gale. But he resisted, remembering Izel's warning. And Mateo steered them into a maze of shallows, the reefs slowing the sloop, but a cannon shot splintered the boat's side, and they limped to a rocky outcrop, patching it with coral and vines. And Mara, checking Elias's arm, saw the serpent mark darken, as if the relic's power stirred the curse, and she urged him to rest. But Elias, driven by the locket, refused, studying the map, which showed Cueva de los Muertos as a jagged island, its center a cave where the eye rested, guarded by visions that could shatter minds. And as they sailed again, the sea grew colder, the stars hidden, and whispers filled the air, memories of the Brotherhood's victims, their voices pleading. And Elias, clutching the locket, fought them off, focusing on Mateo's chant. And when they reached the island, its shores black with jagged rocks, the air was heavy, the jungle silent except for a low hum. And they hid the boat, following the map to a cave, its entrance carved with eyes that seemed to watch. And inside, the eye rested on an altar, glowing within unnatural light. But as Elias reached for it, the air shimmered, and visions assaulted them. Elias saw his family dead, Mara saw chains, Mateo saw his lost crew, and they fought through, Mateo's chant grounding them. And Elias grabbed the eye, its touch cold, and they fled, pursued by shadows, not pirates but spirits, which dissolved in the dawn. And back at the boat, they sailed away, the eye wrapped with the relics, its visions quieting. But Seraphina's ship followed, her voice vowing revenge. And Elias, feeling the locket, knew the fight continued, the altar still pulsing. And as day broke, He vowed to destroy them, for Hawkins, Mara, Mateo, and Izel, and the sea whispered back, promising more trials, its cold, unnatural glow casting fleeting shadows across the small boat's weathered deck as Elias Blackthorn stood at the bow, the meteor-forged blade, the conch, and the eye of the abyss wrapped tightly in cloth beside him, their combined power thrumming like a distant heartbeat. While Mara, her hands rough from gripping the tiller, steered through the Caribbean's restless waves, her eyes scanning the horizon where the first light of dawn bled into the stars, her face a mask of determination tempered by the weight of their endless journey, and Elias, feeling Hawkins's locket pressed against his chest, the pearl in his pocket pulsing faintly despite Izel's shielding ritual, and the serpent mark on his arm tingling with a stubborn persistence, as if the curse still wove its threads through his blood, knew that their triumph at Cueva de los Muertos was but a fleeting victory in a war against the Brotherhood's sprawling network of ritual sites, each altar a dark anchor binding the sea to their will, and he clutched the turtle-shell map from Kalia, its carvings now etched in his mind, pointing to their next destination, an island called El Arrecife de los Lamentos. Its ghostly radiance flickering across the battered planks of their tiny vessel as Elias Blackthorn stood at the prow, the ancient blade forged from a fallen star, the carved conch, the eye of the abyss, and the veil of tides bound in rough cloth beside him, their collective energy thrumming like a storm trapped in a bottle, while Mara, her fingers raw from wrestling the rudder, guided their course through the Caribbean's turbulent waves. Her gaze locked on the horizon where the last stars dissolved into the blush of dawn, her expression a blend of iron will and bone-deep weariness, and Elias, the weight of Hawkins's locket resting against his heart, the pearl in his pocket faintly pulsing despite Anna's protective right, and the serpent scar on his arm prickling as if the curse still coiled within his blood, understood that their victory at El Arrecife de los Lamentos was merely a brief respite in their battle against the Brotherhood's vast web of sacred sites, each one a dark fulcrum channeling their sinister dominion over the seas, and he gripped the turtle-shell map from Kalia, its etched lines now as familiar as his own pulse, directing them to their next target, an island named Puerto de las Sombras, where the Brotherhood concealed a relic called the Pulse of the Abyss, a coral-crusted sphere rumored to command the ocean's deepest flows, capable of conjuring maelstrom or stilling raging tempests. And Elias, his mind clouded by the vanished journal's cryptic omens, pondered whether this relic could expose the Brotherhood's remaining strongholds or seduce him with its power, as the blade, conch, eye, and veil had, challenging his soul's resolve to resist the curse's allure, and Mara, reading his unease, spoke quietly of her ancestors' lore, how the Arawak viewed the ocean's depths as a cradle of existence, home to spirits like Atabey and Alakan, and how the Brotherhood's rites had defiled those sacred waters, turning their blessings into tools of ruin, and she proposed they seek a hermit named Luz, said to dwell on a nearby islet, a woman who had once been a captive of the Spanish but escaped to live among the spirits, and Elias, clutching the locket, nodded, for every companion bolstered their struggle against Seraphina's relentless chase, her black-sailed ship a persistent phantom drawn by the relic's restless hum, and as the sun climbed, bathing the sea in shades of gold and sapphire, they sighted a small islet, its shores edged with jagged reefs that gleamed like shattered crystal, and they dropped anchor in a quiet cove, the water so clear they could see fish weaving through coral, their scales glinting like treasures, and hauling the boat ashore, they concealed it among mangroves, their roots curling like the serpent's scar, and trekked inland, following a trail of polished stones that sparkled in the morning light, leading to a hut draped with vines and shells, where an elderly woman sat, her face etched like weathered coral, her eyes sharp with an otherworldly glint, introducing herself as Luz, and Mara, speaking in a blend of Spanish and native tongues, shared their mission, presenting the turtle-shell map, Tino's vial, and Anna's herbs, and Luz listened, her fingers grazing the map's grooves, and she nodded solemnly, her voice like the murmur of tides, declaring Puerto de las Sombras a realm of lost spirits, where the Brotherhood had enslaved a storm goddess named Jurican, now warped into a force of chaos. And she offered to teach them a song to soothe Jurican, a hymn of reverence that could dampen the pulse's grip, but it demanded a heart unburdened by dread, a trial for Elias, whose nightmares were haunted by visions of defeat, and Luz, sensing his fear, touched his arm, her hand cool, and warned that the relics he bore were both salvation and peril, their power a double-edged blade, and she guided them to a seaside glade, where a small shrine of shells and driftwood stood, ringed by blossoms that danced in the breeze, and there, beneath the noon sun, she began a ceremony, burning herbs and chanting in a language that felt timeless, the words flowing around Elias like a current, and Mara joined in, her voice clear, while Diego, their ally from the prior island, lent his gravelly tone, and Elias, tentative at first, followed, the relics in his satchel lightening as if in approval, and the pearl cooled its barrier fortified by Luz's ritual, and she handed them a small conch etched with symbols, to place on the pulse when found, to quell its power, and over a meal of grilled fish and breadfruit, Luz shared tales of the ocean, how it held the echoes of the lost, murmuring their grief or hope, and Elias, listening, felt the locket warm, as if Hawkins's spirit lingered, spurring him forward, and that night, they rested in the hut, but Elias's dreams were troubled by the pulse, a sphere glowing in a dark chasm, revealing futures where the sea devoured all he cherished, and he awoke, heart racing, to find Luz watching the sea, her expression grim, warning of an approaching storm, not natural but conjured, and they rushed to the boat, launching it into the surf, the relics and conch secured, and as they sailed, the sky darkened, clouds twisting like a vortex, and Mara, singing Luz's hymn, calmed the waves slightly, but the pearl flared brighter, its shield weakening, and Elias wrapped it tighter, dreading it would summon Seraphina, and soon enough, black sails emerged, the sloop slicing through the storm, its crew's chants carried on the gale, and Elias, grasping the blade, felt its energy surge, urging him to summon a maelstrom, but he held back, heeding Luz's caution, and Diego navigated them through a labyrinth of reefs, the shallows hindering the sloop, but a cannon blast cracked the boat's hull, and they limped to a rocky outcrop, mending it with vines and driftwood, and Mara, inspecting Elias's arm, saw the serpent's scar darken, as if the relic's power rekindled the curse, and she urged him to rest, but Elias, driven by the locket's weight, pressed on, studying the map, which depicted Puerto de los Sombreros as a crescent of dark sand, its heart a lagoon where the pulse rested, guarded by Jurican's fury, and as they sailed again, the sea grew colder, the stars obscured, and murmurs filled the air, voices of the forsaken, begging for release, and Elias, clutching the locket, pushed them away, focusing on Luz's hymn, and when they reached the island, its shores sharp with black rocks, the air thick, the jungle silent save for a low wail, like a mourning spirit, and they hid the boat in a cave, following the map to a lagoon, its waters glowing with a spectral light, and there, floating in the center, was the pulse, throbbing like a living heart, but as Elias reached for it, the water surged, and a figure rose, not a spirit but Seraphina, her eyes like storm clouds, flanked by her crew, their tattoos glowing, and she demanded the relics, claiming they unlocked Jurican's full might, and a clash erupted, Mara wielding her dagger, Diego his cutlass, Elias the blade, its edge humming through the air, and they pushed the pirates back, but Seraphina chanted, summoning a whirlpool that threatened to swallow the lagoon, and Elias, placing Luz's conch on the pulse, countered with her hymn, the orb's glow fading, and he seized it, its weight heavy with power, and they fled, the lagoon collapsing behind them, waves thundering, and back at the boat, they sailed away, the pulse wrapped with the relics, its rhythm slowing, but Seraphina's ship pursued, her voice swearing retribution, and Elias, feeling the locket, knew the battle endured, the altar still thrumming, and as dawn broke, he vowed to dismantle them, for Hawkins, Mara, Diego, Izel, Anna, and Luz, and the sea murmured back, as dawn's golden light spilled across the Caribbean, painting the waves with hues of amber and rose. Elias Blackthorn gripped the turtleshell map, its etched lines guiding their battered vessel toward the next sacred site, the Isle of Shattered Whispers, where the Brotherhood of the Abyss concealed another relic, the heart of the Maelstrom, a jagged obsidian stone said to bind the winds themselves, capable of summoning gales or silencing tempests, and Elias, his heart heavy with the pulse of the Abyss now secured in the rough cloth alongside the ancient blade, the carved conch, the Eye of the Abyss, and the Veil of Tides, felt their collective hum intensify, a restless energy that seemed to whisper of both salvation and ruin, while Mara, her hands still raw from the rudder, steered through the turbulent seas, her eyes scanning the horizon for Seraphina's black-sailed sloop, its phantom presence a constant threat, and Diego, patching the boat's hull with salvaged driftwood, muttered prayers to his ancestors, his cutlass at his side. Its blade nicked from the clash at Puerto de las Sombras. The serpent's scar on Elias's arm throbbed, as if the curse woven into his blood stirred with each relic they claimed, and the pearl in his pocket, wrapped in Anna's protective herbs, pulsed faintly, its shield weakening under the strain of the relic's power, while Hawkins's locket rested against his chest, a warm reminder of their vow to dismantle the Brotherhood's network of altars. Each one a dark fulcrum twisting the ocean's sacred balance. The Isle of Shattered Whispers, according to Luz's tales, was a place where the sea itself wept, its cliffs carved by centuries of storms, hiding a labyrinth of caves where the Brotherhood conducted rituals to enslave the wind goddess, Coatlicue, twisting her breath into a weapon of chaos. And Elias, haunted by the vanished journal's cryptic warnings, wondered if the heart of the maelstrom would reveal the Brotherhood's final stronghold or tempt him further into the curse's grasp, its allure a shadow over his resolve. Mara, sensing his unease, spoke of her Arawak ancestors, how they revered the winds as messengers of Atabey, carrying the voices of the lost across the seas, and how the Brotherhood's rites had corrupted those currents, turning whispers into screams, and she proposed they seek a fisherman named Mateo, rumored to live on a nearby quay, a man who had once sailed with the Brotherhood but fled their cruelty. His knowledge of their rituals a potential key to navigating the island's dangers. Elias nodded, clutching the locket, its warmth grounding him as they sailed toward the quay, the sea glinting like polished sapphire under the rising sun, and they soon sighted a rocky outcrop, its shores fringed with mangroves, their roots twisting like the serpent's scar, and they anchored in a shallow cove, the water clear enough to reveal schools of fish darting through coral. Hauling the boat ashore, they concealed it among the mangroves and followed a path of worn shells, leading to a weathered shack where an old man sat, his hands gnarled from years of netting fish, his eyes sharp with the weight of memory, introducing himself as Mateo. Mara, speaking in a mix of Spanish and native tongues, shared their mission, showing him the turtleshell map and Luz's conch, and Mateo's face darkened, his voice low as he spoke of the Isle of Shattered Whispers, a place where the wind carried the cries of enslaved spirits, and he confirmed the heart of the maelstrom's power, warning that its chamber was guarded by traps, blades hidden in stone, winds that could hurl men into chasms, and by the Brotherhood's acolytes, their tattoos glowing with dark rites. He offered a talisman, a small stone carved with Taino symbols said to quiet the winds long enough to pass the island's outer cliffs, but only if their hearts were free of doubt, a challenge for Elias, whose dreams were plagued by visions of the pulse glowing in a dark abyss, its power threatening to consume him. Mateo, sensing his turmoil, placed the talisman in Elias's hand, its surface cool, and shared a tale of his escape from the Brotherhood, how he had stolen a fragment of their lore, a chant to weaken their altars, and he taught it to Mara, her voice steady as she memorized the words, while Diego etched the chant's symbols onto a piece of driftwood, his fingers steady despite the storm brewing on the horizon. That night, they rested in Mateo's shack, the relics secured in Elias's satchel, their hum a constant pulse, and he dreamed of the heart, a black stone pulsing in a cavern of howling winds, its surface etched with runes that burned into his mind, and he awoke to find Mateo staring at the sea, his expression grim, warning of a storm conjured by the Brotherhood, its clouds twisting like a serpent's coils. They launched the boat into the surf, the talisman and relics secured, and as they sailed, the sky darkened, the wind shrieking with voices of the lost, and Mara sang Mateo's chant, her voice cutting through the gale, calming the waves just enough to keep their course. The pearl flared brighter, its barrier fraying, and Elias wrapped it tighter in Anna's herbs, dreading it would summon Serafina, whose sloop soon appeared, its black sails slicing through the storm, its crew's chants a low drone on the wind. Diego navigated through a maze of reefs, the shallows slowing the sloop, but a cannon blast grazed their mast, splintering wood, and they limped to a rocky shoal, mending the boat with vines and Mateo's nets. Mara, inspecting Elias's arm, saw the serpent's scar darken, as if the relic's power rekindled the curse, and she urged him to rest, but Elias, driven by the locket's weight, pressed on, studying the map, which showed the Isle of Shattered Whispers as a jagged crescent, its heart a cavern where the heart of the maelstrom rested, guarded by Coatlicue's wrath. As they sailed, the sea grew colder, the stars hidden, and whispers filled the air, voices of the forsaken begging for release, and Elias, clutching the locket, pushed them away, focusing on Mateo's chant. When they reached the island, Its cliffs loomed like broken teeth, the air thick with salt and sorrow, and they hid the boat in a cave, following the map to a narrow pass where the wind howled, its force nearly knocking them back. Elias held the talisman, its carvings glowing faintly, and the wind softened, allowing them to enter a labyrinth of caves, their walls etched with runes that pulsed like the relics. Deep within, they found the heart, a black stone throbbing on a stone altar, its surface alive with shifting shadows. But as Elias reached for it, the ground shook, and Seraphina emerged, her eyes like storm clouds, flanked by acolytes whose tattoos glowed with dark power. She demanded the relics, claiming they would awaken Coatlique's full might, and a battle erupted, Mara with her dagger, Diego with his cutlass, Elias with the blade, its edge singing through the air. They pushed the acolytes back, but Seraphina chanted, summoning a gale that threatened to tear the cavern apart, and Elias, placing Mateo's talisman on the heart, countered with the chant, the stone's glow fading, and he seized it, its weight heavy with power. They fled, the cavern collapsing behind them, winds roaring, and back at the boat, they sailed away, the heart wrapped with the relics, its rhythm slowing, but Seraphina's sloop pursued, her voice a curse on the wind. Elias, feeling the locket warm, knew the fight was far from over, the Brotherhood's altars still pulsing across the seas, and as dawn broke, he vowed to destroy them, for Hawkins, Mara, Diego, Izel, Anna, Luz, and Mateo. And the sea whispered back, its voice a mix of grief and hope, urging them toward the next trial, a sunken temple called La Tumba de las Olas, where the Brotherhood guarded the final relic. The breath of the deep, a crystal vial said to hold the ocean's soul, capable of reshaping the tides or drowning the world. The map showed the temple submerged off a reef-ringed atoll, its entrance hidden beneath a coral maze, and Mara, her voice steady, spoke of legends her grandmother told, of a sea goddess, Yamaya, whose breath filled the vial, now twisted by the Brotherhood to fuel their dominion. They sailed toward the atoll, the relics hum a constant pulse, and Elias, his scar burning, felt the curse tighten, the pearl's light dimming, and he wondered if each relic claimed brought them closer to victory or doom. Diego, sharpening his cutlass, shared tales of his youth, sailing with his father, a Taino fisherman, and how they had once glimpsed the glowing reef, alive with spirits, and he believed it was the temple, its light a beacon for the lost. As they neared the atoll, the sea grew still, an unnatural calm, and they anchored near a coral wall, its surface shimmering with bioluminescent algae. Donning woven nets as makeshift diving gear, they plunged into the depths, the relics secured in sealed pouches, and swam through the coral maze, its passages lit by glowing fish. The temple emerged, a ruin of carved stone, its arches draped with seaweed, and they entered, the water heavy with an ancient presence. Inside, the breath of the deep rested on a pedestal, its crystal vial glowing like a star, but as Elias reached for it, shadows moved, Seraphina's divers, their blades flashing, their tattoos pulsing with dark rites. A silent battle unfolded underwater, Mara's dagger darting, Diego's cutlass slashing, Elias's blade cutting through the current, and they repelled the divers, but Seraphina, swimming like a specter, chanted, stirring a vortex that threatened to crush them. Elias placed Luz's conch on the vial, singing Mateo's chant through the water, its notes muffled but resonant, and the vial's glow softened, its power subdued. He seized it, the water calming, and they surfaced, gasping, the relics intact, but Seraphina's sloop waited, its cannons primed. Diego steered them through a narrow channel, dodging blasts, and they escaped under cover of a sudden fog, the breath of the deep now with the other relics, its pulse steady but heavy. Elias, clutching the locket, felt Hawkins' spirit urge him on, but the serpent's scar burned hotter, the curse whispering of betrayal, and Mara, her eyes fierce, reminded him of their bond, forged through battles and shared loss. The map pointed to one final altar, the throne of the abyss, a sunken city where the Brotherhood planned to merge the relic's powers, summoning a cataclysm to enslave the seas. As they sailed, the sea murmured, its voice now a chorus of hope, grief, and defiance, and Elias, holding the relics, vowed to end the Brotherhood's reign, for his companions, for the spirits of the lost, and for the ocean itself, its heart beating in their hands, ready to be freed or doomed by their next steps. As the sea murmured its chorus of hope, grief, and defiance, Elias Blackthorn stood at the prow of their weathered vessel, the turtle-shell map clutched in his calloused hands, its etched lines now worn smooth from constant tracing, guiding them toward the final altar of the Brotherhood of the Abyss, the Throne of the Abyss, a sunken city lost beneath the waves of a reef-ringed atoll known as La Corona de los Olvidados, where the Brotherhood planned to merge the powers of the relics, the ancient blade forged from a fallen star, the carved conch, the eye of the abyss, the veil of tides, the pulse of the abyss, the heart of the maelstrom, and the breath of the deep, into a cataclysmic force capable of enslaving the seas, bending tides, winds, and storms to their sinister will. And Elias, his serpent scar throbbing as if the curse coiled tighter with each relic they claimed, felt the weight of Hawkins's locket against his chest. Its faint warmth a tether to his vow to dismantle the Brotherhood's dominion, while the pearl in his pocket, wrapped in Anna's fraying herbs, pulsed erratically, its protective barrier weakening under the strain of the relic's collective hum, a restless energy that seemed to whisper promises of power and warnings of ruin in equal measure. Mara, her hands blistered from wrestling the rudder through turbulent currents, steered with a steady gaze fixed on the horizon, where the last stars faded into a sky bruised with clouds, her expression a mix of iron resolve and bone-deep weariness, her voice low as she recounted her grandmother's tales of Yemaya, the sea goddess whose breath filled the crystal vial now secured in Elias's satchel, and how the Brotherhood's rituals had defiled her essence, turning her gifts into tools of chaos. Diego, mending a tear in the sail with nimble fingers, shared stories of his Taino father, who had spoken of La Corona as a sacred place, a city built by the ancients to honor the ocean spirits, its spires once gleaming under the sun before it sank in a divine flood, now a graveyard of coral and bone where the Brotherhood conducted their darkest rites, and he carved a new symbol into his driftwood talisman. A spiral to honor the winds, his gravelly voice joining Mara's in a quiet chant to calm the sea's growing unrest. The atoll lay days away, its reefs a labyrinth of jagged coral and hidden currents, and the map, glowing faintly under moonlight, revealed the throne as a vast chamber deep within the sunken city, guarded by the spirits of those who had perished in its fall, their voices now enslaved by the Brotherhood to protect the altar. Elias, haunted by the vanished journal's cryptic omens, wrestled with the fear that the relic's power might seduce him, as they had nearly done at Puerto de las Sombras, where the pulse of the abyss had whispered of dominion over the seas, and he wondered if the throne would test his soul further, its promise of ultimate control a shadow over his resolve. Mara, reading his unease, spoke of the Arawak belief that the ocean was a cradle of existence, home to spirits like Atabey, Alakan, and Yemaya, and how the Brotherhood's altars had twisted their blessings into curses, chaining the sea's heart to their will, and she proposed they seek an elder named Taino, a descendant of the original guardians of La Corona, said to live on a nearby islet. His knowledge of the sunken city's secrets a potential key to breaching its defenses. Elias nodded, the locket warming as if Hawkins's spirit approved, and they adjusted course, the sea glinting like polished obsidian under a waxing moon. The journey was perilous, the waters thick with sudden squalls, and Seraphina's black-sailed sloop, a relentless phantom, appeared on the horizon, its crew's chants carried on the wind, their tattoos glowing with dark rites, and Elias, gripping the ancient blade, felt its energy surge, urging him to summon a maelstrom to crush their pursuers, but he heeded Luz's warning of the relic's double-edged power, instead directing Diego to weave through a cluster of shoals, the shallow reefs slowing the sloop's pursuit. A cannon blast splintered their mast, forcing them to anchor in a hidden cove, where they mended the damage with vines and driftwood, Mara's hands steady as she tied knots, her eyes scanning the sea for signs of Seraphina's approach. The serpent's scar burned hotter, its lines darkening as if the curse fed on the relic's proximity, and Mara, inspecting Elias's arm, applied a poultice of Anna's herbs, her touch gentle but firm, urging him to rest. But Elias, driven by the locket's weight, studied the map, its lines now pulsing with a faint glow, as if the sea itself guided them to the islet. They reached it at dawn, its shores edged with white sand and mangroves, their roots curling like the scar, and they hauled the boat ashore, concealing it among the foliage before following a trail of polished shells to a clearing, where a small hut stood, draped with nets and shells, its door open to reveal an elderly man, his face etched like weathered coral, his eyes sharp with ancient wisdom, introducing himself as Taino. Mara, speaking in a blend of Spanish and native tongues, shared their mission, presenting the turtleshell map, Luz's conch, and Mateo's talisman, and Tino listened, his fingers tracing the map's grooves, his voice like the murmur of tides as he spoke of La Corona, a city built to honor the sea's balance, now a prison for its spirits, where the Brotherhood had enslaved Yemaya herself. Her breath trapped in the vial to power their final altar. He offered a relic of his own, a small coral amulet etched with runes said to open the city's gates, but only if the bearer's heart was free of fear, a trial for Elias, whose nightmares were haunted by visions of the sea devouring all he loved, the relics glowing in a dark abyss, their power overwhelming his will. Tino, sensing his doubt, placed the amulet in Elias's hand, its surface cool, and shared a chant to honor Yemaya, its words a prayer to restore her freedom, and Mara memorized it, her voice clear as she practiced, while Diego carved the runes into his driftwood, his hands steady despite the storm clouds gathering overhead. That night, they rested in Tino's hut, the relics hum a constant pulse, and Elias dreamed of the throne, a vast chamber of coral and bone, the breath of the deep glowing at its center, surrounded by spirits who wept for release, their voices merging with the sea's murmurs, and he awoke, heart racing, to find Tino watching the horizon, his expression grim, warning of a storm conjured by the Brotherhood, its winds carrying the cries of the enslaved. They launched the boat into the surf, the amulet and relics secured, and as they sailed, the sky darkened, clouds twisting like a vortex, the sea roiling with unnatural fury. Mara sang Tino's chant, her voice cutting through the gale, calming the waves just enough to keep their course, but the pearl flared brighter, its barrier fraying, and Elias wrapped it tighter, dreading it would summon Serafina. Soon enough, the sloop appeared, its black sails slicing through the storm, its crew's chants a low drone, and Diego navigated through a maze of reefs, the shallows hindering the sloop, but a cannon blast cracked their hull, forcing them to a rocky outcrop, where they mended it with nets and driftwood, Mara's poultice soothing Elias's scar, now black as ink, as if the curse sensed the throne's nearness. They sailed on, the sea growing colder, the stars obscured, and whispers filled the air, voices of the forsaken begging for release, and Elias, clutching the locket, pushed them away, focusing on Tino's chant. When they reached La Corona, the atoll's reefs loomed like a crown of thorns, the water glowing with bioluminescent algae, and they anchored near a coral wall, donning nets to dive into the depths, the relics secured in sealed pouches. The sunken city emerged, its spires draped with seaweed, its arches carved with runes that pulsed like the relics, and they swam through a coral maze, guided by the amulet's faint glow, until they reached the throne, a vast chamber of coral and bone, the breath of the deep glowing on a pedestal, its light a beacon in the dark. But as Elias reached for it, shadows moved, Serafina's divers, their blades flashing, their tattoos glowing with dark power, and a silent battle erupted, Mara's dagger darting, Diego's cutlass slashing, Elias's blade cutting through the current. They repelled the divers, but Serafina, swimming like a specter, chanted, stirring a vortex that threatened to crush them, and Elias placed Tino's amulet on the vial, singing the chant through the water, its notes muffled but resonant, and the vial's glow softened, its power subdued. He seized it, the water calming, and they surfaced, gasping, the relics intact, but Serafina's sloop waited, its cannons primed. Diego steered through a narrow channel, dodging blasts, and they escaped under a sudden fog, the breath of the deep now with the other relics, its pulse steady but heavy. Elias, feeling the locket warm, knew the fight was not over, the Brotherhood's final altar still active, its power threatening to merge the relics into a force of destruction. The map pointed to a hidden cove, the final refuge of the Brotherhood's leader, a sorcerer named Varkas, who sought to wield the relics' combined might to reshape the seas.